Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, dust slayers, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks, journalists. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. And let's go to the not so good old USA. And I want to talk about something that's kind of conceptual. I usually do kind of stories and highlights and geopolitical events and things like that. But I want to talk about this whole idea of this media war on Donald Trump. And I felt compelled to do it. I was going to do it anyway, but now I feel even more like I have to do it because I had a confrontation with one of the people commenting below one of my videos, and by the end, of course, because they didn't really understand the concept of how the interaction between media and these political candidates go. So he ended up being very abusive and insulting by the end, and so it was a little disconcerting because he just didn't really grasp these concepts, and it's kind of hard to explain sometimes, and it's a little complex, particularly because we live in a world now where just too many people just see headlines and buy these narratives that are out there, and so it makes it even more of a labyrinth out there that one has to navigate, and it's very unfortunate. I find that very frustrating. My experiences, I just got back on Facebook for anybody who wants to look me up there. Um, and I find that everywhere, and it also involves a lot of people I've known for a lot of years, and it's just tough when they assume that they know based on what they see in the media, and of course I assume I know what I know, but I go far beyond the media headlines to get my story, so I feel a little more legitimate. But let's get into this thing because it's a very important part of this picture, and one of the reasons why people really have a hard time misunderstanding what's going on. Although you can't underestimate the symbiotic relationship between the media and Donald Trump. Now, of course, he got a lot of free publicity just because of the things he said. So he spent an amazingly low amount on media during the campaign because he didn't have to spend $1 billion like Hillary Clinton, and because he's worked with the media before, and he, Hillary has as well. But of course, Donald Trump's relationship to them is a lot different, particularly because of the fact that he's a non-politician, and so the media knows. They know about his personality. They know that they can potentially push his buttons, and he's going to probably say something even more outrageous, and that's happened numerous times. Certainly, the man has no tact, but and he can be caustic. But as I've discussed with many people, frankly, I'd rather have somebody like him in office where, all the dirty laundry is kind of right up front, all the secrets of his personality, et cetera, where a lot of these politicians that people love so much, let's remember that the root of the word politics and politician is polite. And so their politeness deceives the fact that they're behind closed doors, oftentimes with the same attitudes and same phrases and same racism and same ugliness that Trump likes to air out in public sometimes. They say those things behind closed doors. And frankly, I'm more uncomfortable with that. And I find that sort of deception more distasteful than Donald Trump. And I know a lot of people wouldn't agree and probably wouldn't feel the same way, but that's just me. I don't really have that big a problem with assholes. And so anyway, let's get into this a little bit more. So we know there's a media war, and a lot of it has to do, of course, with Trump's personality. So you have to go bring in the whole idea of the cult of personality. People like these slick politicians, and the fact that they get pandered to all the time and say exactly what they want to hear. And there's all this feigned outrage, and there's all this feigned sentiment crying for poor children in the United States when the presidents and politicians in the U.S. are bombing children all over the globe and don't shed a tear. In fact, behind closed doors laugh about it, and sometimes not behind closed doors and laugh about it. And a lot of this, like I say, is becoming more and more crucial because we have all this non-news, this fake news, as Washington Post labeled it, and that's part of this muddying the water. Even discussing the media war and journalism and the state of journalism right now, when we have this concept of fake news going around. And then Washington Post, of course, pulled it after they let the genie out of the bottle, and it's too late. Everybody's talking about fake news now, and so now the water is muddied so much that literally nobody can tell the difference between what's supposedly real news and what's fake news anymore. They're so interchangeable, and of course it all depends on what your preconceived narrative is. Ironically, there's a historic distrust of media right now, except still when the media says exactly what people want to hear, they lap it up. And so that's one of the points I wanted to bring up is that isn't it interesting that we have a historic low trust of media, and yet people continue to use media as their source and find it to be true when they agree and untrue when they disagree. It's kind of like the way that people like Edward Snowden used to be held up as a whistleblower hero by the liberal base, but now they've come up with these WikiLeaks and theoretically had something to do with all this brouhaha about the Russians. Of course, he's perceived as a Russian agent. I was really shocked by that, and we see that kind of thing all the time. But we have to remember that these headlines can be very manipulative, and it's very easy to do. They just have to use keywords and key photos, and just like when they want to demonize somebody like Hillary, and in the conservative press, they find all the most hideous photos they can find of her and put them up. And then, so now we have the national media always putting up the most hideous pictures they can find of Donald Trump. And so that drives the message home. You don't even have to see the article or the headline, and you get to see this kind of distortion. And then the way they characterize it, everything that Trump does, of course, they label as somehow unprecedented, bizarre. Here he goes again. And so we see that with almost every article that comes out. And one good example of that is there's an article that said Trump's far-right bizarre billionaire behind his presidency. And so they characterize his backer as bizarre, referring to the Mercers. But they don't want to bring up the fact that we have Sheldon Adelson, who is very bizarre, who backed the Trump campaign, but also backed all the status quo GOP candidates before that, or the Koch brothers, who are bizarre billionaires who back conservative candidates, or we have Haim Saban, who's a bizarre billionaire who bankrolls the Clintons. And so there's plenty of examples of bizarre billionaires that back these campaigns, but you put that headline out and people just lap it up. And then another one was a headline about Trump won't be worse than Obama. And then, of course, everybody reads the article, and it turns out to be the president of Venezuela, considered a nut. So once again, it's easy to demonize Trump by putting a headline like that up. And then, of course, we have the infamous CNN assassination story discussing the scenarios how Obama could stay in office if Trump was assassinated. I mean, that's outrageous. I mean, if the tables were turned, there would be hell to pay, and there would be all kinds of outrage. But there was no outrage because, now the liberal base, unfortunately, embraces violence in the assassination, encouraging the assassination. Who can forget now, too? We have Madonna speaking at the Women's March in Washington, D.C., advocating blowing up the White House. And how Madonna, the media treats her like some sort of icon and somebody who's qualified to talk about politics and discuss these issues, when it could be argued that she's almost the female Trump. I mean, very, very lascivious character, and a lot of questionable things about her. But that's people love celebrities. That's another whole video. But now, then the outrage starts because, now there's been this media war on Trump, and he understands there's been a media war. Anybody that really takes a deeper look can see that the media has declared war on Trump. And now, of course, it's outrageous that he wants to move the press corps outside of the White House to a building across the street. A symbolic gesture, really, but of course that creates outrage as well. And then also the CNN press conference, where Trump's first press conference, where he basically shut down what was actually a very rude CNN reporter and called them fake news and wanted to move on and berated this reporter in that room. And frankly, that's what they deserve. I think all the press deserves that. They are rude, and they do have an agenda. And so even though the Trump administration and his spokesman maybe didn't handle that situation as best as possible, the fact is Trump has every legitimate reason to be upset about the way the press treated him, and certainly all the media in the United States almost was polling for Hillary Clinton, and it was almost a done deal. In fact, if you look at media, they were all laughing about the idea that Trump could become president, and then had to eat their words when he got the nomination, and now he's president. So now it's all out war on Trump, and it was all out war during the campaign. There were so many distortions and so much misinformation, and like I've said before, there's plenty of real things about someone like Trump that they can go after and build up their case, but they feel it's necessary to distort everything and build up this narrative. And another example of that, of course, is the story about Trump removed the bust of Martin Luther King from the Oval Office. Well, it turns out it was a bullshit story. It's still there, and then the so-called journalist who reported the story said, "Oh, I guess it must have just been blocked by somebody standing in the room." So just outrageous, really outrageous. And then one of the reasons why there's a war on Trump is because the way the media has portrayed Hillary Clinton and the way the media has portrayed the last days of the Obama administration is in stark contrast. Everybody lamenting this great leader when his approval ratings during his presidency were pretty low at quite a few points, and now he's held up as some sort of icon. But the same thing happened to Bill Clinton. Didn't matter that he was a womanizer and a rapist and a liar, and was almost impeached. He was a hero then, and he's a hero now, which once again is part of the dialogue. How could people be that outraged by Trump when Hillary Clinton's husband is as sleazy as they come, and certainly could qualify as the Democratic Trump in many ways. And in fact, there's a connection there because Donald Trump and Bill Clinton have been in the same circles for years as well. But like I say, stark contrast. They completely have made Barack Obama and Michelle, who I admit are pretty classy, but they're given a free ride by the press, and that's just how it goes. But anyway, like I say, this other part of this quotient too is of course, the CIA. There's been this media battle out in there in media land about the CIA and Trump's adversarial relationship with the CIA, and that's also understandable. And let's remember that there's a big connection between the CIA and media, and I'll attach those below for those who have been paying attention to history over the last 30 years or so. There's plenty of evidence to show that the CIA is firmly entrenched in the United States media, and therefore it gets to be a very complex relationship when you have the media and the CIA involved in all this propaganda and misinformation. And so anyway, so there we have it. I just want to do kind of a discussion in broad strokes that people need to understand that part of the dynamics here are there really is a war on Trump. The status quo GOP, the status quo Democrats both did not want Trump during the nomination process, and the media was all out against Trump then. And then, of course, when he reacts to the fact that he's being treated so unfairly by the media, then he's construed as being hot-tempered and being caustic and being abusive and all this. And he's not a politician, so he's bound to act that way. And and the stories continue to pile up. Of course, we had that silly story about the Trump and the dossier and the yellow golden showers and all that. And of course, it turned out to be complete hoax. And yet, first of all, the damage is already done. And that's the most important point I want to make. They don't have to do much. They put some headlines and some bad pictures, and the damage is already done. And a story like the Trump dossier and the golden showers that can be splashed across the headlines, the damage is done. And it's declared a hoax almost immediately as it comes out, and yet it still has legs, and everybody's talking about it, and it's already implanted in people's minds. And so that's how it works. But that thing was completely debunked, and journalism has sunk to new lows. And not only does Donald Trump agree with that, but so does a noted, somewhat liberal journalist Matt Taibbi agrees that with Trump on that. And I would also have to agree with Putin's statement that the press are a bunch of prostitutes, or worse than prostitutes. In fact, a lot of the alt press calls them prostitutes, and that's a good term for it, particularly because journalism has gotten so sloppy, if you even want to call anything journalism anymore. We also have to remember that a handful of major corporations and the status quo control all your information and control all the media and control all the news. Not a conspiracy theory, just a fact. And the fact is that they are corporate sponsors, and they can manipulate the news by putting pressure on these journalists, so-called journalists that they own. So that's another part of it as well. So anyway, there we have it. I could probably go on and on and on because there's just so much you could discuss in this rabbit hole. But the basic fact is that people need to grow up and put their big boy pants on and realize what is going on here, and that for the next 4 years, unless Trump comes through on all his promises and things actually get better, which is a possibility that 50% of the people have ruled out, but it's a possibility. But still, I think what we're going to see is the media war is going to continue, and the media will continue to have a war because they've been maligned, their egos are hurt, they've been attacked by Trump, and they are going to get their revenge just the same way that we're going to watch the GOP status quo want to get revenge, and we're going to see the status quo Democrats want to get their revenge, and everybody's praying for him to fail. I don't know. I'm going to wait and see, and I'm praying for him to succeed. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?